Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Nature Echoes on this Sunday, 11th of June, 2023. And thank you, everyone, for joining me. I think we're working very good. If everybody's here, this is our weekly time of echoing our news, stories, poetry, and art. It's connected to nature folklore and our precious water, holy wells, woodland, hedges, and wildlife. So, hail, howl, hole, and holy good health for you all on this lovely, still summery time here in South Leitrim. And excuse me for I'm still trying to actually put the show on the road because I've just rushed over from an interview that was through the Zoom with the Shauna Home. And it was with a podcast, and it's embarrassing. I forget the name of it. So I'm going to put it in the message what the podcast was. So I zoomed over from there. So I had to switch from Zoom to the StreamYard. And I'm not sure if I'll get everything checked up, but never mind. I'm here. You can hear me, see me, I think. I haven't put a notice in. So please, anyone who's joining us, please introduce yourself and where you're watching from. Lovely to hear from you. And now I've got to see, I think I've got my pictures. I'm going to see if I got my pictures rolled up. This is one thing I haven't sorted out during the transition. There we go. That kind of shows what we're doing. I haven't got this lined up yet. There we go. And I should be able to. There we go. Swap between me and the pictures, and we're on a roll. And there we go. We've got a list there of the things I'm going to be going through on this edition of Nature Echoes. So you've got the circle tradition of oral stories, the reliving ancient stories of Irish townlands, and when trees were our gods and goddesses. So those are the three echoes I'm going to be covering through this session. And also the latest that's going on with the Journaling Nature Folklore course and other news and other articles that I'm putting up on Substack. So as usual, this Nature Echoes Live, plus the Growing Nature Folklore video articles, photo library, and the Journaling Nature Folklore course modules. They're all brought to you by a kind support of you kind subscribers. And that's the link there for the subscribers. Actually, I'm going to have to change that because I've simplified that because if you actually do substack.com at Nature Folklore, so I must change that for next week. That will get you, but that works all the same, so let's not worry about it. There's a free subscription. You go to that, you can join for free, see what's going on, read some articles. You get access to at least 40 very informative Nature Folklore articles a year. And if you upgrade to become a support subscriber, this includes my Journaling Nature Folklore course. There's 20 course modules per year, and you can join in at any time because Journaling Nature Folklore is a revolving course. It's not a linear one. And you get the latest updates added on the modules each year. I'm going to be adding to it, and they'll just go around in circles and cycles. And you get to join in any of the 4 seasonal online live workshops a year. I hope to get going very shortly, and I hope that some of us will actually meet up live. Anyway, that initial subscription there, €5 a month or 50% discount if you go for the annual, €30 a year or the equivalent in your currency. So thank you for your support, subscribers. And the support is still why I'm actually here, still broadcasting. So with all that pledging going on, let's see if there's anybody saying anything. I don't think there's enough people in numbers for comments right now. I don't see anybody. So I'll just get on with the show because a lot of people will be watching this in the archives. More people seem to watch it in the archives through the summer, hence why I'm later at starting at this 9 o'clock time instead of the 7 as it was before, and then 5. We'll go back to the earlier time when the winter weather comes in. But I think with this as it is, this is probably a better time. I'm not sure how it is with people over in North America. So I look forward to your comments. As I say, people are now rolling in. I can see that. So please introduce yourself. I haven't had time to type that in because I just jumped from a Zoom interview straight into the show with about 5 seconds transition time. So I'm still trying to make sure stuff's plugged in. and I hope you can hear and see me okay. So I'll start with the circle traditions of oral stories, and I better make sure my picture is in line here. Yeah, I'll get going with this now, I think, because I was reminded this week of the wonderful author, and I think I got a picture that I can show of her. This is Sophie Strand. No, that's not her. Let's get her. That's it, Sophie Strand. And she, a wonderful explanation from her about nature folklore. And the way she put it, it's much more concise than I may do. And there you go. You can read it, what she actually says there for herself. But for most of human history, our stories were oral, carried in breath, sustained by constant retelling and revision. And they were mostly about animals and plants and weather systems. And the older gods had horns, and goddesses were often snakes. Stories were not linear, they were cyclical, teaching us how to live with seasonal fluctuations. Storytelling was not concerned with human superiority. It was not about individual characters. It was about relationships. And when we look back at the earliest cave paintings, we see running herds of horses and bison and crowds of animals and chevrons and patterns that track storms and moon cycles, all maps of kinship. So the important wording of that for me is perhaps not being concerned with human superiority, which a lot of modern folklore and mythology is. But if I told those sort of stories with the heroes and people chopping other people's heads off, maybe my readership and viewership would be increased by 1,000%. For example, there'd probably be at least 300 of you watching by now. But I'm not going to go there. It's not what I do. And I love the way that it was said that gods had horns, women were snakes. And I think I got something. Is that, yeah, I think I can show you something on that. There you go. There's an image of God with horns, and there's a woman snake on the rest of it there. Absolutely brilliant. So that was, I think it's about as much as I can say on that one. Now, the comments, Claire's come in, which is lovely that Claire's watching. Perfect reception. That's great. As I say, I just shifted over, showing her home, she was doing a live podcast with me, and I had about 10 seconds to switch over from the Zoom to this StreamYard, and luckily everything's up and running, which is fantastic. So anyway, I'll go on to the next echo, which is very interesting, and because Edwina Gukian, well, she's done it again. If you're familiar with Edwina, she always has these amazing projects. She started off very much as a popular dancer and a dance teacher, and then she started getting young children to dance out some of the old mythology, the folklore stories and the seasonal stories. And she'd done a fantastic job over the winter getting people to make their straw hats and their mama's costumes. And now the next one, I'm really excited about this one. She's doing this with the help of the Save Leitrim County Council and Creative Ireland. And together, they've grouped together 20 Leitrim farmer volunteers. Is this a farmer picture? Just in case you don't know what a Leitrim farmer looks like. And they're going to tell stories of their farmlands and townlands, of the townlands that their farmlands are on. And the intent is to celebrate the land through stories of its history, heritage, folklore, biodiversity, and community. I'll take that picture off because I'm going to talk about her in a moment. But the farmers, they're working with a lovely sound engineer and performer, Natalia Bayliss. And that was that picture there. There's Natalia. They're out in the woods putting together some woodland sounds and so forth. And she's going to include soundscapes that's going to accompany these farmer stories. And also local farming. There's a nature campaigner in Leitrim, wonderful nature campaigner in Leitrim. John Matthews is his name. And he's actually going to walk around with the land of each farmer, getting the stories. That's going to be recorded as well. And then going to talk about the folklore. They're going to talk about the history of their farms. And also discuss the biodiversity that's present, how that's changed on the land, and how that can possibly be improved. And then when the recordings are on productions, they're completed. As usual, Edwina doesn't do things on a long finger. She got Leitrim into making mummers and going out there and doing the mummers, reviving the mummer show. She got that together in about 3 weeks. Well, this is a bit longer. This is going to take 3 months. It's a 3-month project. Get these farmers geared up with their stories, recorded, mixed. And when it's all together, which is going to be in September, there's going to be an old heritage store. Let's show you a lovely example here. This one here. It's going to be from the... again, some lovely people there. An old heritage store from the building or former building of each farm. It's going to be hung up, propped up in a field, within the field of each of those 20 farms, where the farmers have told the story. And then each door, there'll be a phone number on the frame. And you dial that number on your mobile. You can do it there and then. I think it's best to do it there and then because you'll be in the middle of the field. So your whole senses can get a sense of what's being talked about. And you can listen to the produced narrative of that farm that you, the visitor, is standing in. And the public's going to be granted access to all of these 20 farms into the field where these doors are standing with the secret phone numbers. And that's going to be during September. And in this photo here, that's actually a door made by Edwina's grandfather, Hughie Guckian. And he actually made that door. See that red roof building in the background there? That's where that door was made by her grandfather there. So fantastic project. And I think it's going to be incredibly popular, very unique, very creative, very noble. It's incredible that Edwina she's got a lot of help, as I said, with the organization. So the fact that she engineered and is putting this together and conducting it is absolutely fantastic. Right, we got a problem here is can't hear. Goodness me. Is anybody else here not hearing at the moment? George Thomas, he's hearing. He says, very interesting, really. So, Breezy, are you actually hearing anything at the moment? I hope so. I hope it's come through. Claire, you said you're getting perfect reception. So if anybody can give me a note, say that they're hearing it, not hearing it. And George Thomas, I'm getting people through YouTube, which is great. George Thomas is all good. So definitely it's all good through the YouTube, which is fabulous. Lovely to have you YouTube people here this week. Anyway, this is the main feature. I'm going into the third echo of this session. How we doing? Because this is very involved. I'm pretty excited about this one. When trees were our gods and goddesses. Now, this third echo today, I'm actually responding to a wonderful tree, water. It was a tree and water. My getting tongue-tied. I was on that interview just done was over an hour, so I'm not surprised. Anyway, as I say, this is responding to a wonderful trees and water article from the Kurdish Center for Studies that's actually in Germany. And the Kurdish Center there, it's a non-partisan research center in Germany, and it also encourages international dialogue on the Kurds, their heritage, and their condition generally. And this may seem strange for me to be presenting Kurdish mythology folklore, as most of the folklore share on Nature Echoes is most of it's Irish, and Scottish origin seems to be where it comes from. I'm trying to get my pictures sorted out. But folklore tends to be the core and root of a national identity these days, no matter how much a nation tries to flag its constitution as being an identity. People still put the folklore together because they want that identity. What pictures? So no matter how a church or a religion claims to be an important part of a national identity, my personal belief is that folklore is always molded by the people, and they put this together and they use this folklore to guide them through the identity of where they lived. I was talking a lot about this in the interview that I've just come from. And I believe that the scribe works of the medieval scribes, said to be the authentic source of Irish folklore and mythology, was also moulded to the needs and desires of the chieftains and the abbots that employed the scribes. And as I mentioned earlier, the expression of folklore seems to have moved from the earliest folklore, where folklore and stories told about seasons, weather, flora and fauna, and the behaviors. But once the scribes started, they wanted these abbots, and they wanted to be heroes. They wanted to have fantastic dynasties. And it's a bit like when you go for a job now, you've got to do as your employer says. If you bring too much of your own ideas into it, then you could get fired because you're upsetting the ego of your employer, even though your idea might be fantastic. Very much, I think, for the scribes as well. So the scribes that are supposed to be authentic, to me, they're just promoting the deeds of individual heroes. Now, my lifelong interest is, how did folklore get here? Now, it seems that Ireland, which is now an island, of course, may not have been an island as soon back as 10,000 years ago, but was a peninsula in Europe. And I think about it starts showing some photos to show what I'm talking about here. Oh, yeah, that's, I don't know why you got that there. That was sort of a bardic thing. I forget what I was saying where he was. But here we go. And I put a ring there. I think you can see it. I've done a ring there, roughly where Ireland is today. But look at that. It was just a semi-peninsula that was sticking off of Europe. And much of the folklore that arrived is much younger than when Ireland was tucked into a part of Europe. One thing I find hard to capture is the realm of folklore that had its world source in Ireland. They're just, Ireland, even as a peninsula, I don't think was the source of original folklore. A lot of people find that nasty because, as I say, national identity is based on the folklore. And certainly as folklore and mythology in Ireland is told now, it's a very, very strong identity. You know, we're not English. This is our folklore. We're Ireland. So there's a lot, you know, this is the way that nationalism has developed. Anyway, I'm trying to see what films I've got. So let's the she. I suppose the way we talk about the she, that's the closest. And that to me is even a repackaging of folklore from other parts of the world. Now, thousands of years before there was even an island that became Ireland, whenever I try to personally track down the origins of folklore, I end up looking into the land areas now: Iran, Iraq, Syria, Turkey, the Balkans, sometimes Africa, sometimes India, but rarely China or Indochina. So today I'm going to be looking at Kurdistan and adjoining countries. And this, I think I can bring up a bit of a map so you know what I'm talking about there. There we go. That shows you where Kurdistan is. It's a bit like Palestine. They don't really have their own country. They're really a race, a clan, a tribe, I suppose you would say, that have to share with those countries that are nations. And of course, that causes a lot of disruption these days. The Iraqi people really don't seem to like the Kurds very much. The Iranians have a problem. Syrians kind of put up with them. Turkey, it's on and off. Anyway, I'm not going to go into the politics of that. But the article that my inspiration for this, it came from an article, fantastic article. It was posted by Tara Jaff. I think I've got a picture of her. See if I can pull her up. No, that's not her. There she is there with a cat. And she's got a Kurdish background, and she performs with modernish Irish folk harp and also a traditional wire-strung harp as well. I think that's the wire-strung there. I'm not sure. Anyway, the article I'm taking most information from was written by Himdad Mustafa, and this is the author of a lot of the words I'm going to be sharing. And he's from Kurdistan. He's now living in Germany, working with the center there. And he's very much a contributor to the Kurdfish Center for studies. And he opens up by reminding us that trees, rivers, water sources, and mountains are regarded or were regarded sacred by most of the cultures of the world. And their folklore and mythology stories are all rich in telling about trees, water, specific rocks, all of them embodying deities and spirits and the souls of our ancestors, just like what people celebrate at sites and heritage trees, etc., around Ireland. And within the Kurdish culture, this is very, very strong. I think I'll get my next picture up for this because I think this is a lovely, well, that's the wrong picture. That's the one I want to show. So within the Kurdish culture, it's all very strong. The passions are still strong with folklore, and it includes not only the trees, but the plants, the animals, and the birds too. And their folklore became embedded in native religions, such as Yazidism. I think that was it. There's some practicing of Yazidism there, some getting together, or some people say Yazinism. And this is practiced very much within parts of that Kurdistan region that I was showing you. And that includes parts of Iran and Iraq today, which still tolerates it. And it's still the most dominant nature feature, in their rituals, in their customs, in their folklore, are trees, and specific trees especially too. Let's bring another one up to get into the mode here, because that's a sacred Kurd tree. And until the mid-19th century, the tribes in Kurdistan, they still worship their sacred trees. And they actually, I don't think we've got anything here, but by the trees, they built stone altars close to them, but as long as the stone altars don't harm the trees. And that's very similar to what happens with some trees here, but that happens very much with the holy wells, doesn't it? So they equally worship the water that flowed nearby, and they put up altars for that. Do I have a water one here that I can show you? No. The Kurds, they also believed that the trees, they were in service to the trees. This is what the Kurds believed in. And that that the trees were the command of all the human race, of all mammal race, and the trees were actually in command of human life and death. And it makes sense, because the trees, anywhere, even if you just look at Ireland, they were on this land for thousands, if not millions of years before any humans and any mammals were here. But the trees became dependent on the mammals. Mammals, including ourselves, became dependent on the trees. So this symbiotic, you know the word, symbiotic relationship actually happened. So it took millions of years to evolve that. So in the mid-19th century, travelers and researchers fascinated by the Kurdish traditions, because it did seem very unique to people around Europe. And they discovered these Kurdish people were worshipping ancient trees. And of course, in those days, mid-19th century, they also were missionaries. So they also had the goal of trying to bring Christ to different parts of the world. And they were trying to bring to the Kurdish people, but they try and bring the Psalms and the Gospels to the people. And they get whacked by this amazing passion for this nature, for these trees, for the water. And of course, there's things in the Christian religion about idol worship and the problems with idol worship. So they were written off as treating these trees as being a part of idol worship, especially with the stone altars as well. But there again, the earliest Christian churches, they had lots of idols, didn't they? And altars. Anyway, one interesting custom that was practiced, and is very familiar to what you know in Ireland, is tying rags to trees. And I think this is a Kurdistan one. I hope I got the right picture up. Let's see, there you go. There, look at that one. We go around Ireland and people complain about how the trees are overhanging with too many rags, too many votives. But this is a Kurdistan holy tree, if you can actually see the tree. Anyway, as you see, your familiarity. Let's show an Irish example. There you go. That's the sort of thing that happens in Ireland. And I think that's a Leitrim one too, South Leitrim. But this is, all of this was due to a belief that trees were miracle workers and had the ability to share its healing powers. That's what the Kurdish people believed, that the trees themselves were miracle workers. And the trees themselves would respond to any prayers that anyone hung from the tree within a rag. And it's believed that it was the deities and the beings within the trees. It's almost as if they operated the trees, they were in charge, and they would decide on the healing. So there's a slight difference with the Kurdish approach to these sacred trees and the sacred springs and water, because in Ireland, especially now, it's been changed where it's believed a saint or a goddess or a deity will all do the healing, but that may be within the water, it may be within the air, but they don't associate it as in Ireland as being actually direct within and from the tree. They feel that they made the prayer, it's gone into this sort of unseen place, and that's where the healing would happen. But the Kurdish people believed the tree and through the water did it all. And in Ireland, we've had the most beautiful blossom, haven't we? Hawthorn blossoms, the fairy trees, and we believe that this is a conduit to that realm of healing. But as Christianity tried to make headway into Kurdistan, Iraq, and Iran with these Christian-type researchers who were missionaries, the ancient rituals, these tree ones, the missionaries tried to reduce and replace these prayers with Christian-style ones. And also the Muslims did this too, because obviously they're Muslim countries now. And so their approaches were quite similar to the Christians. And there was a Christian missionary, William Wigram. I haven't got a picture of William Wigram, but in 1914, he reported the ancient origin of tree worship was still lingering in the rural areas, but they had already converted people to the Psalms and the Gospels in the urban areas, and the people in those urban areas were starting to regard these country ways as being awful, even the work of the devil. And so people in urban areas, they were despising the people that were still, they would say, worshipping the water and the trees. So there was an incredible division here. And I'm going to be talking about this later when we talk about witchery in September. But a similar practice was done then. Now, there's a French researcher and missionary, but he was, this man, I'm trying to think of his name. He was quite an empath. He wasn't as crude as the others. And he wrote a book, and his book is actually called The Kurds. And it was published during the 60s. And he claimed in his book that trees, water, and animal worship, it was still going on in rural Kurdistan through the 60s. And especially a belief in nature guardian spirits. Have I got any more photos to show you of this one? Let's see, what's this one? There we go. Now, I'll keep this up while I talk on this one. Yeah, that's in the 60s. They were still believing in rural areas, believing in the guardian spirits. And they actually, what he reported was that the clothes they wore wove in imageries of these guardian spirits of nature, the Kurdish clothes. And one of the main features in their designs, and it's I only got this picture, very hard to find, they're really into spiders. I don't know. They certainly regard spiders as being sacred, and that was woven into their clothes. Unfortunately, it's not traditional clothing. That's from a fashion show quite recently where the spider is still there in a Kurdistan fashion show. But it just gives you, that's the best thing I can have for the sense of it. But modern Kurd researcher, Ahmad Stafni, he's still writing stuff about this, and he claims that there's always been three categories of sacred trees within cultures around the world, and you'll be able to relate familiar Irish folklore to this as well. And sorry, I'm losing the bit on that one. Right, and the first was tree gods. It's funny, they regard the trees as gods, not as a feminine. Well, they are above ground anyway, and they're pointing towards the sun. And so that became the foundation for the creation of organized religions, probably. Well, most world religions have a patriarchal format, so no wonder they associate them, the big tall trees, to gods. But second are the sacred trees where the entities live, where the tree spirits. Over in Kurdistan, where we have the Shi or the fairies or the Fae, they have the jinns. And the jinns are quite similar to the sprites in Cornwall, that kind of being anyway. And then the third is the metaphysical trees, such as the tree of life, the big one, the tree of wisdom, the tree of knowledge, or what they call the sky tree. Well, it's not really that, is it? Do I have something in that? That's an imagery, a Kurdistan sort of art imagery of their idea of the tree the sky tree, actually. They regard that one as a sky tree, but it's how we understand the tree of life, tree of wisdom, tree of knowledge. And I mentioned Yazidism as being one of the eventual tribal religions of Kurdistan. And Yazid, it's interesting, that leads, see if I can get pictures up for this. Yazid is an oak tree. That was the origin of Yazid that they believe in. It's an oak tree deity of the Tarahoya tribe amongst the Kurds. And they were the last to adopt the Muslim religion. They preserved their nature belief ways well up to quite recently, and they were really stood firm with it well past the 16th century, when other tribes in Kurdistan had either gone Christian or they'd gone the Muslim rate. Anyway, the actual Yazidism religion is said to have been founded by a woman. Her name's unknown, but it's said that the idea of the oak god was invented by a woman around the 8th century. Now, I find that an incredible coincidence too, because I was just talking on the interview. We all know about the Bridget story, Bridget of Kildare, from around the 5th century. But the one I talk of, and I've done it in my articles, is also another woman, story of another woman that's oppressed, that would have been 7th or 8th century, because 6th century, there was an epidemic, there was plagues that pretty much wiped out at least 40% of this island and island, and it wiped out the scriptoriums and the monasteries, because that's where people were grouped together. So it said this woman came along, got to Kildare, saw the remains of a monastery, and that's another story of Bridget, that she founded the scriptorium there, not in the 5th century, but in the 7th or 8th century, set up the scriptorium, and the whole basis of her belief and why she called herself Bridget was all down to an oak. So there we go. In Kurdistan, there we have the god, sort of god figure of the oak, being founded by a woman, and the scriptorium, which was said to be, the scribes were all men, which was spreading the belief. A lot of similarities, I find coincidence. Now, it seems that the land now, Kurdistan, it came about when the land itself was called Kurdistan. The Muslims segregated the Kurds due to a fear that the Kurds could curse them, because they had all this incredible heritage of this mythology and folklore, a bit like these Christian missionaries. They came in and they, oh, I don't know if I'm going to tell you about Christ, because you've got more powerful stuff there. And they thought they'd be cursed by these sacred trees. And of course, we have that fear in Ireland. People have a fear of hawthorn, believing they'll be cursed with that. Now, one of the biggest feast days for the Kurds is actually called the Feast of Yazid. And that's actually on the Friday before the winter solstice. So that celebration of Yazid the oak. We have the Yule log. It's more sort of Scottish and North, but we have the Yule log about the same time. And Yazid was regarded to be both the god and devil in one. But I find that a tough one to consider, because my own beliefs, or non-beliefs, you might say, I don't believe in a division of God and devil, but that's for another episode. But Yazid's oak tree is also central to the tree of life creation myth amongst the Kurds. And along this, the big tree of the oak, there's also stories of the rose bush too. But I haven't had enough time to figure that one out myself. But for several centuries, the Kurds wove rugs. And as I was saying, they put the animals and spiders in their clothing. But the rugs that they wove were representation of this world tree, this tree, sky tree, representations of oak trees surrounded by rose petals. So a typical Kurdistan rug has the oak tree central to it. I wish I had pictures of this. And the tree is surrounded by these rose petals. Absolutely beautiful. Now, one of the Kurdish sacred tree reverences is the Dari Marazan, which is known as the Tree of Wishes. Sorry, I've run out of photos. I didn't have time to get the latest photos up. But this now has a link, this Tree of Wishes, to the almost lost Holy Welsh tradition, where the Dari Mazin tree would be visited by barren women, and they would request a blessing from this oak tree to give them fertility and the ability to become pregnant. And I'm wondering if I do have any more pictures up that I can show you. What's this one? That's a lovely tree by water. I think I'm I'll save that one because I'm going to come back to talking about that. But anyway, talking about the Darien Mirazan tree, the oak tree for fertility and the ability to become pregnant. And the wishing woman would tie a ribbon to the tree as a symbolism of attaching a part of themselves to the tree. And this was to receive the blessing and fulfillment of their wish. Now, these wishing trees would also be beside a stream, water source, or sacred water point. So I'm going to show this tree, and I'm going to take a break to have a look at your comments and what you've been saying so far. There's still some of you with us because this is a long topic. And Claire's talking about the project by Weena, Magical and Essential to Remember This Story. So that's, I think that's the only recent comment. There's no comments yet. Probably this idea of a background of Kurdistan in relation to the being an origin maybe of the folklore and traditions of Ireland. I find those connections absolutely amazing, not to be ignored as such. Right, to continue what I was saying, the wishing trees, because in Ireland, there is a tradition. There used to be Imok. It's now more or less on the eve of May Day, where women would stare into the water and try to get a vision of the mate that they're going to be meeting over Bildna. And in Kurdistan, the tradition is that people in pain would do the same, either by water or they would do the same by a tree to receive healing. And some of that does happen here in Ireland, certainly in Scotland too, very much in Scotland. But the tradition is kind of done in a very fragmented way, because the whole tradition of this is not being very familiar. But people of pain believe that by tying a ribbon and attaching it to the tree, their sacred tree, it's very much like the Irish rag tree tradition, but it adds the belief that the tree will be their source of healing, which I've already said. Now, one extra is including a vow that if a baby is born, because of the tree of fertility, or if healing from the pain happens, that's a miracle. If you can go to that tree, fertility happens, baby's born, or you go to that tree and the pain goes. So in Kurdistan, if that happens in Ireland, people will just pray, thank God, thank Jesus, it would just be a prayer for thanks. But in Kurdistan, they took that a bit further. And the tradition there is if a baby was born from a visit to a tree, if a pain did go, then they're obliged to repay that by performing an act of useful service for their local community. They would have a mediator for that. So if they'd become well or they had a child, they say, okay, there's some retribution for that. And it's kind retribution. People will be pleased to give this retribution because of the healing and the wonderful thing that's happened. Now, as I mentioned, the Kurds believed in two realms. They did, like Christians, they did believe in realms like heaven and hell. And I feel that happened through later religious teaching. I don't think that was the origin of the Kurdish tradition myself, but they also, as I've mentioned, they believed in two tribes of spirits lived in the major trees, like the oak trees. And the healing spirits were known as the jinns, which are very much like the kind she, like the kind fairies, and like the kind sprites of Cornwall. But they had misfortune spirits that they could actually believe to curse you, and they were known as the Jews. Sorry, it's not J. I have to be careful. I should have pronounced that better. Jews, D-E-W-S. So you've got the jinns and the Jews so the jinns sort of gave the healing and the benefits, but there were the misfortune. That's what they became believed, and that was their sense of heaven and hell that they had evolved from their original beliefs. Anyway, so the tied ribbons, when they put them on the tree, that was to communicate with the jinns and to ask for the power of healing from the tree. And in addition to that, they put extra votives, which would be made out of natural materials like the British crosses, like we do, love knots, that type of thing. So make votives made with natural materials, not with plastic. Well, they didn't have plastic back then, but not with plastic that people use now. And you'll leave these votives also at the base of the tree. And the idea is that these votives, they would ward off the dews of misfortune, and so that the jinns could carry on with the healing through the ribbon and the message that you put on the tree. I hope that's understandable. Now, the members of some Kurdish tribes, and this is something I thought was horrific, they hammer nails into the sacred trees. And the idea of hammering the nails, I can imagine if you've got frustration from pain, it's a bit of a distraction. I want to get rid of this pain. Hammer the nail into the sacred tree. And that was to transfer the pain or illness that they have. And the sacred tree that was nailed into was also known as a Dara Biznar. See, we've got the oak, the Dara, even in Kurdish language, ancient Kurdish language. The Dara Biznar is the name of the nail tree that you put the nail in to get the healing. Now, that may help us understand why people do this at wellside trees, or even throw metal coins and pins into the holy wells, into the water over here, and certainly in Scotland. But unfortunately, through northern Kurdistan, the Turkish regimes, they invaded the Kurdish areas and they cut down these sacred trees, especially by the water. And that was a kind of psychological warfare against the Kurds, because they wanted to force them into the Muslim Islamic religion totally. But since 2018, the Turkish-backed Syrian mercenaries, they've even been worse. They've cut down something like 1.5 million trees in northern Kurdistan. So it's escalated. It's really escalated to get rid of this Kurdish heritage. So it's all, it's part of an ethnic cleansing process against the Kurds by cutting down their trees, their sacred trees. And that includes cutting down these wishing trees that they relied on for the healing and for fertility. So there you have an example with that invasion of a kind of a left-wing type appreciation of trees and water springs, millions of years older appreciation well before humans arrived, versus this kind of right-wing human mentality of, well, we're in charge now, not the trees, so we do not need you trees anymore because we're in charge. Because, as I say, the Kurdistan people believe that the trees were their guards and their guides. Now, one of the other earlier cleaning of Kurdish traditions that was achieved by Muslims was replacing the belief of spirits inhabiting water, just the same as in Ireland. They convinced the Kurds that there are not these entities in the water, but it's the presence of Muslim saints. So these waters and sacred trees, they became known as pirs, as holy places, just like in the same way as the springs and wells in Ireland that have been around for thousands, millions of years. Suddenly, they were venerated by saints, or for saints, St. Patrick, Hugh, and so forth. So the teachings then changed to the holy places. They were being where the Muslim saints lived, and some stone sites were included in this reverence as well. So, as I say, in the holy well culture of Ireland, we believe that the wells, if it's a Bridget well, then it is a Bridget well. So that's where people come to communicate with Bridget. So it's similar with the Patrick wells, the Brendan wells, the Hughes wells, similar. But these male saint wells, they're not so popular today compared to the Bridget wells, especially as we had our first public holiday for Bridget this year. And even other sainted women like Gobnant is becoming very popular this year as well. And there's a Tractor, and there's Lazia, and there's others. Now, modern women become very devoted to these women saint wells because they feel it's a wonderful connection to their desire, I'm trying to think of the right word, but for the movement towards women equality and fairness in causes. So I tend to quietly cringe when people talk about saint reverences by the wells. And those natural springs, as say, been around for thousands, millions of years before the saints came along and branded them. So to me, it's the same thing. The Muslims have hijacked the Kurdish sacred places and got them to believe that that is the place of the saints, and the saints have replaced the entities. And Ireland, they have pattern days for saint days at Wells. This is so in the Kurdish regions. They have Pious Holy days right through Kurdistan. So the special annual days, when the Pious days, when people in Kurdistan, they bring offerings, and the offerings they bring, it's not the votives from natural materials like before. These days they bring samples of baked bread, sweets they've made, because they like making sweets in the Middle East. And they bring to the sacred tree or the sacred water, even to a stone mound. They bring these things on these equivalent of pattern days, the period that they have, the period day. Pious days are like pattern days. So some of these ancient-based local community sacred sites, they became pilgrimage holy sites, became more and more popular for pilgrimages by the Muslims. And people would travel large distance, Muslim people would travel large distances to some of these sites, some of these tree and water sites, to actually hear the saints' stories of the saints rather than of the traditions and folklore before. And they would also believe that, and they would tell the people, they've convinced them that it's the saints within the trees. And water has become trusted more than the more ancient entities. So that you call upon the saints now in Kurdistan, that they've been kind of brainwashed into that, call upon the saints for healing and protection rather than the jinns that they believed in living in there. But there's still pockets that are returning to these old traditions, just like there is in Ireland. Now, once the Muslim beliefs had taken over the spirit jinns, the trees became known as Peris. That was the original older name. Now it's Peris. So from Peris holy places to Peris. And the Peris were promoted as being mischievous. So it said that these Peris that still lived in the tree, they were still there, but they were mischievous and malicious, just like the church stories about the fairies today. You know, be careful of the fairies, we're told today. But before the Christians came along, people were part of the fairies, part of the tree, they lived with them. So the fairies were also regarded as being the helpers of the devil. And they were actually had another name as that came, and you'll love this one. The fairies actually, over time, has become known as the... I'll spell it for you first. Sheyts. Sheyts, otherwise known as the Shites. So the fairies became known as the Shites. And the Shites were believed to be spirits that left the trees and probably kicked out by the saints, and they started wandering around. They were wandering spirits whose mission was to coax people, just like the Irish fairy lovers, like the Jean Cannock, or the English fairy lovers like Tamlin. And they would bully people too, and as well as being aggressive lovers, they would steal things that were sacred to people. And the whole story of the changelings, the stealing of the baby boys, that's definitely within the folklore with the Shites in Kurdistan. So similar stories in the same, and that's where you got another parallel in the folklore. So the early tree and water spirit beliefs of the Kurds was never, ever accepted by the Muslims, really. But to relate to these spirits to Muslim saints was regarded as the conduits for performing miracles. So these tree and water connected saints, they were regarded then by the Muslim takeover, I suppose, the compromise, like the Christian compromise that has been here with how Bridget is told, how the holy wells are told, the saints of the holy wells, everything being the chosen ones of Allah in the Muslim areas. And so over recent years, Turkey and Iranian regimes, they've still been rampant in destroying and altering the tree and water landscapes of Kurdistan. Rivers have been diverted, dams built, and as I've already said, the very active deforestation. So it's as if all of this construction, probably called modern development, it's just been done purely for the intimidation of destroying the ancient customs, the ancient traditions, the ancient folklore, rather than actually providing local benefits. So the intention seems to be to break up the Kurdish attachment to the land. But there's, alas, thank goodness, just as there is in Ireland, in Scotland, and around the world, there's actually a growing Kurdish movement that's aiming to stop this. The Kurdish movement, and this is wonderfully happening in Australia too, amongst the Aborigines, and it's happening with the native people in the North America. They're rebuilding these old traditions, the old folklore, knitting them back together as much as they can, because it brings people back to the collective consciousness. Everything, you're living a life on symbols that is kind of more real. It's the flow of life than this sort of statues and this other stuff from the main religions. And so most of the offensive of bringing back these old traditions is through education, especially integrating it back into the schools where they can. So they're bringing back the old folklore through education, out of school, in the school. The one thing they're not doing, as I was explaining earlier, is that the whole Kurdistan origin is very womb-like, very feminine. So it's very networking. So education is going to be their way. That's going to be their offensive. They're not going to be holding weapons to bring back folklore. The weapons are there to destroy the folklore and the tradition. So the Kurdish culture is making progress. They're making lots of reconnection with the nature world and using that again for guidance, healing, and directions. And I hope in some way, though it's been a long talk from me, that this Kurdish example, plus those two echoes earlier that I was talking about with the earliest folklore being stories were told before we had language. It was all about transitions of weather and seasons. And then as soon as we had language and scriptoriums, suddenly it was all about singular warriors cutting people's heads off. So I hope we can reflect on these echoes today. I know it's a long one. But these are examples of things that I talk about through nature folklore generally. Get yourself to those situations where you can put that whole language aside. You can relate to the prompts. You can relate to the clairvoyance and psychic reception of wherever you stand. So really, the reestablishment of these early folklore traditions, to me, it's like a mission of being environmental rather than ego-mental. So there's something to remember. Are you an environmentalist or an ego-mentalist? That's the big divisions here. I shouldn't talk of division, but that's that's sort of like a polarity. But environmentalism and holding on to this folklore, knitting it back together, I think it is essential for us sustaining our connections to real consciousness, intelligence, rather than the artificial profit-making server intelligence that we're being swiped with right now. So an inspiration from Yazid, remember Yazid being the oak being the symbol of healing, symbol of connection. Allow your inspiration to come from that or similar rather than an AI printout. Remember, AI means artificial intelligence, whereas I think Yazid and the oak, the original customs of the oak, that's where the intelligence, not only the oak, any trees, anything with the land, that's where the intelligence is to feed from. So I've gone on and on and on and on. I'm surprised I've done that. We're still under an hour. I know some of you late. Thank you, Davina. I hope you can watch this from the beginning again. Oh, Josie, I had an interview with Josie Posey yesterday. Wonderful interview about the fairies and the Fey world. And she's a little bit up on this Kurdish folklore as well. And as I say, Claire seems to be astonished. As I say, Claire, with this one, I cheated today because I was taking a lot of my information from this Kurdish article from this person from the Kurdish Center that's in Germany, and that was kind of posted by Tara Jaff, because she's one of these people, one of these Kurd people, is helping people, and she's got great friends trying to bring back the old traditions and their work and rebuild the old Kurdish culture. But to me, the interest is how that is folklore. There's so much in parallel in Ireland. If I was living in Scotland, I would see parallels there. If I was living in Norway and Sweden, I'd see some parallels there. And I think it's an illustration that though we use folklore as a kind of foundation to our for our country's sovereignty, our nation's sovereignty, nation's identity, I think it's just that. But to use it as our personal sovereignty, we're onto something different, something more natural, something more useful, something more connecting. So I think I talk about the latest Substack. As I say, I do this stuff with Substack. I've managed to paste, for those who have subscribed to me on the Substack, I'll get rid of this note here. So you can read that, so I can do my bragging again. There you go, the Nature Folk, that's the address there. And those of you who are subscribed, doesn't matter which level you're on, the free or the paid, you'll have received 2 chapter articles from my Us and Trees series. But I think I'm going to take a break from that. I'm not going to complete that series for a while because I want to get focused on a short midsummer series, because it's not far before we get to the 21st of June, which is the midsummer date this year. Then, of course, on the 23rd of June, 2 days later, we got St. John's Eve, and I hope to get to the Efrina Crossroads, Crossroads dancing, and they have the bonfire. That's here in South Leitrim as well. And in the first, as I say, the second echo, I talked about yet another project from Edwina. This is yet another project, and she's been doing this revival crossroad dancing project for a few years now. And it's absolutely fabulous. Quite a gathering of dancing, folklore, music, and bonfire and food and so forth. It's about 30 minutes drive from me because Leitrim's a huge county, but I hope this year I go. Last year was lovely and sunny. Actually, it's quite a showery forecast this time. I wish I had decent video recording abilities for that event, but my phone for taking videos is not that great. But maybe the Ditch Witch, Tara Tyne, and her partner Dave will be there to film a bit. That'd be lovely. That will save me the hassle. But hopefully I'll post something about the Effingham Crossroad dancing on after the 23rd. Well, it's funny that we use bonfires to celebrate St. John the Baptist, who used water. Anyway, never mind. That's the bonfire night in Ireland is then. So in the next journal in Nature Folklore, the next module I'm supposed to have got out today. Sorry for those of you who subscribe to a higher level. Most of it I've got written up. I've got the module mainly written up. So apologies, I'm going to be late again with this one because from Tuesday, I've got another interview tomorrow. And then from Tuesday until the end of the month, I'm quite busy here with visitors, and some of them are overnighters. But in between moments, I'm going to do my best to catch up on what I can, get that next module up to you. And that's about the most news I've got on from my Substack area. So I'm also from Substack. I'm really looking forward to starting and posting the First Harvest series. And I hope to get started with that from the middle of July. And people are already posting about First Harvest subjects, and they've hardly got the seeds in. People do that, don't they? Some people, I know in North America, start putting their Valentine's decorations up on Christmas Day. So we're talking about First Harvest as we're putting the seeds in. So anyway, I hope to start posting the First Harvest series. It's quite a long series. That will start from probably the second week of July. Let's see if there's any more comments from you before I go. There's still some of you amazingly watching. I really appreciate you being here. And yes, glad you're enjoying that. I don't think anybody's put any extra comments that. So thank you for watching this Nature Echoes, an extended one yet again. If you enjoy what I share live, or what I'm going to have to get guests back on again through the Nature Folklore channels. There's the Nature Folklore. I'll get rid of that. Again, just a reminder, there's the Substack link there. There's a free subscription there, and you get access to at least 40 very informative Nature Folklore articles written each year. And if you upgrade to the support subscriber level, you get my journaling Nature Folklore course, which is a 20-course modules. You can join in at any time of the year because it's a course that goes in a cycle. It's not a linear one. And you get the latest updates each year as that goes around into a new cycle. And I'm trying to get 4 seasonal online live workshops going a year. And there are many people subscribing. So hopefully we'll be on to live meetups, retreat that I'll offer subscribers as well. It's €5 a month, or you can get a 50% discount, €30 for the whole year to make sure you get the entire course at least. So thank you, support subscribers, because that's how I can afford to still get subscribing and maybe one day get a decent camera to be out and about and get more videos up for you. So thank you, everyone on that. Coming up next Sunday, I'll probably be midsummer themed. Start that up next Sunday. Anybody else got anything to ask me or share comments? I don't think so at the moment. I'm glad enjoying this Nature Echoes with you. Very long it is too. If you're watching this as a broadcast replay, please keep posting your comments and questions. A lot of people do that now, and I do check the comments and answer them to reply what you got. So I better get going, and wish you all a safe week full of wonder and inspirations, full of lovely enchantments, and that all comes from the presence of the woods, the water, which I've been talking a lot of today, and all those wonderful mysteries of nature. So until next Sunday, have a wonderful week of wonder. So play well, and that's about as much as I've got. Thank you very much. Bye, everybody. Bye. That was lovely. Thank you.